There's someone who has been talking to you every single day for as long as you can remember. It knows every mistake you've ever made, every embarrassing moment, every fear, every insecurity. It remembers things you wish you could forget. It predicts things you wish it wouldn't imagine. It comments on almost everything you do. It tells you what could go wrong, what people might think, why you should have said something different, why you'll probably fail, why you aren't enough. And because you've heard this voice for your entire life, you've probably never stopped to question it. You simply assumed it was you. But let me ask you something strange. If that voice is really you, then who is listening to it? Pause for a moment. Don't answer too quickly. If you can hear the voice, observe it, question it, or even disagree with it. Can the voice and the one noticing the voice really be the same? Here's something even more unsettling. You don't choose your next thought before it appears. It simply arrives. A memory, a fear, a judgment, a sentence. Almost as if someone pressed play. Think about that. You decide what to say out loud, but you don't decide which thought arrives next. So where did it come from? Who wrote the script your mind keeps reading? And why does it sound so convincingly like you? Modern psychology and neuroscience point toward a remarkable possibility. The voice inside your head isn't simply your identity speaking. It's something your brain gradually learned to construct through language, memory, experience, and thousands of conversations you no longer remember, which means the most influential voice in your life may not have started as your own. And perhaps that's the most unsettling realization of all. For years, you've been listening to a voice you never consciously chose. So here's the question. That changes everything. If the voice inside your head isn't really you, then who are you? By the end of this documentary, you probably won't silence the voice, but you may never mistake it for yourself again. Let's go back to the very beginning, long before you had opinions, long before you judged yourself, long before you had an inner voice at all. Imagine yourself as a small child. At first, you didn't think in words. You cried, you pointed, you laughed, you reached for things. The world wasn't narrated. It was simply experienced. Then something extraordinary happened. People began giving your experiences a voice. Be careful. Say thank you. Don't touch that. Good job. You should know better. Thousands of words, thousands of reactions, day after day, year after year. At first, those voices existed outside you. But slowly, almost invisibly, they moved inside. The conversations ended, but the speakers remained. Psychologist Lev Vygotsky proposed a groundbreaking idea. Children first use language out loud to guide their actions. Over time, that external speech gradually becomes inner speech. In other words, before your mind learned how to speak to itself, it first learned how other people spoke to you. Think about that. The voice encouraging you may once have belonged to someone who believed in you. But the voice criticizing you may also carry echoes from people who are no longer even part of your life. A teacher who made you feel small, a parent who expected perfection, a friend who laughed when you were vulnerable. Those moments may have lasted only seconds, but your brain was listening. Long after those people disappeared, their words remained, not as memories alone, but as part of the voice you now call me. Psychologist Bandura showed that human beings learn far more than skills by observing others. We learn attitudes, beliefs, emotional reactions, even the tone we use when speaking to ourselves, which means your inner voice didn't develop in isolation. It was shaped conversation by conversation, reaction by reaction, relationship by relationship. So the next time your mind quietly whispers, "You're going to fail," or "You're not good enough," pause for just a moment and ask yourself something unusual. Who taught my mind to speak this way? Because perhaps that sentence didn't begin with you. Perhaps your mind has simply been repeating a voice it learned long ago. And if a voice can be learned, it can also be questioned. That realization changes more than most people ever imagine, but it leaves us with an even deeper mystery. If this voice was built through language, memory, and experience, why does it feel so unmistakably like me? To answer that, we have to look at how the brain itself creates the feeling of being you. So, if your inner voice was learned, why does it never seem to stop? Why does it replay conversations that ended years ago? Why does it rehearse arguments that haven't happened yet? Why does it return to the same mistakes again and again and again? It almost feels as though someone inside your mind refuses to let the story end. For a long time, scientists believed the brain mostly reacted to the world around it. Something happened, then the brain responded. But modern neuroscience tells a far more fascinating story. Your brain doesn't wait for reality, it predicts reality. Every second, without your awareness, it's quietly asking, what happens next? Is this person safe? What mistake should I avoid? What danger haven't I noticed yet? Because for most of human history, the people who predicted danger often survived it. The ones who ignored it sometimes didn't. Your brain still carries that ancient responsibility. In many ways, it's less like a camera recording reality and more like a simulation engine constantly running tomorrow inside today's mind. Think about the last important conversation you had. Chances are, you didn't experience it only once. You lived it before it happened, while it happened. And long after it was over, you replayed different answers, different endings, different versions of yourself. Not because your brain enjoys making you anxious, but because it keeps searching for a better prediction, for a safer future, for an outcome where nothing goes wrong. That's why the voice never seems to get tired. It isn't trying to torture you. It's trying to prepare you. Neuroscientists have identified a network of brain regions commonly known as the default mode network. What's remarkable about this network is when it becomes most active, not when you're solving a math problem, not when you're focused on the outside world, but when your attention quietly turns inward, remembering the past, imagining the future, replaying conversations, wondering what other people think, creating stories about yourself. In other words, the moments when you whisper, "Why can't I stop thinking?" may actually be the moments when your brain is doing exactly what it evolved to do. But evolution has a blind spot. Your brain doesn't always distinguish between what's happening and what might happen. A possibility can feel like a certainty. A prediction can feel like a memory. One passing thought becomes a story. The story becomes a fear. And eventually, the fear begins to feel like reality itself. Psychologist Beck spent decades studying this process. He discovered that our minds often fall into predictable thinking patterns known as cognitive distortions. We catastrophize. We imagine the worst. We assume we know what other people are thinking. We treat one mistake as evidence that we'll always fail. The voice sounds convincing, not because it's always right, but because it speaks in the only voice you've ever known. And perhaps that's the greatest illusion your mind has ever created. You've trusted countless thoughts, not because you examined them, but because they arrived, wearing your name. But familiarity has never been the same thing as truth. And that leaves us with one final mystery. If the brain can create a voice that feels so completely like you, how do you ever learn to separate yourself from the story it's telling? Because that question may be the difference between living your life and simply believing every thought about it. So, if the voice inside your head isn't always telling the truth, what are you supposed to do? Most people spend their entire lives choosing between two exhausting strategies. They believe every thought, or they fight every thought. Neither one brings peace. Think about it. Have you ever tried not to think about something? The embarrassing moment, the mistake, the fear. The more you tell yourself, don't think about it, the more your mind returns to it, again and again. Almost as if the act of fighting the thought is what keeps it alive. Your mind isn't resisting you. It's doing what minds often do. They return to whatever seems important. For years, many people believed psychological health meant replacing negative thoughts with positive ones. But psychologist Stephen C. Hayes proposed something radically different through acceptance and commitment therapy, often called ACT. What if the goal was never to control every thought in the first place? Because here's something fascinating. Your brain generates thousands of thoughts every single day. Some are useful, some are irrational, some are creative, some are completely meaningless. Yet most of us react, as though every thought deserves a response. Imagine sitting beside a busy highway. Hundreds of cars pass every minute. Some are loud, some are quiet, some are beautiful, some are damaged. Would you run into the road to stop every single one? Of course not. You'd let them pass. Thoughts can be treated the same way. Not every thought deserves your attention. Not every thought deserves your belief, and not every thought deserves a fight. This is known as cognitive diffusion, not eliminating thoughts, not suppressing thoughts, but creating just enough distance to see them for what they really are. Imagine your mind says, "I'm going to fail." Most people react immediately. They defend the thought, argue with it, or surrender to it. ACT offers another possibility. Instead of saying, "I'm going to fail," you quietly notice, "I'm having the thought that I'm going to fail." Only a few extra words, yet psychologically, those words change everything. The thought is still there, but it is no longer speaking with absolute authority. It has become one possibility instead of reality itself, because thoughts are experiences, not instructions. They are mental events, not commands. Clouds passing through the sky, not the sky itself. The voice inside your head will probably continue predicting, continue worrying, continue remembering. That's what an ancient survival brain evolved to do. The goal was never to build a perfectly silent mind. The goal was to stop treating every sentence your mind produces as unquestionable truth. And perhaps that changes something profound, because the moment you stop arguing with every thought, many of them quietly lose their power. Not because they disappeared, but because you stopped giving them complete control. And that brings us to the final mystery. If you can watch the voice without immediately believing it, who is watching? Because the answer may be the most extraordinary discovery this entire journey has been leading toward. Throughout this documentary, we've been following one question. If the voice inside your head isn't really you, then who is? Don't answer, not yet. Instead, try a simple experiment. Right now, don't change your thoughts. Don't fight them. Don't replace them. Simply wait for the next thought to appear. There it is. Now ask yourself something unusual. Did you choose that thought before it arrived, or did you simply notice it after it appeared? That tiny moment changes everything. Because the instant you notice a thought, two things suddenly exist: the thought and the one aware of it. Psychologists call this ability metacognition, the mind's remarkable capacity to become aware of its own thinking. Think about that. Your eyes cannot see themselves without a mirror, yet your mind can somehow observe itself. Perhaps that's one of the most extraordinary abilities human beings possess. Modern mindfulness research builds on this same principle, not by asking you to stop thinking, not by promising a perfectly silent mind, but by strengthening something far more valuable: the ability to notice a thought without immediately believing it. And maybe that's what this entire documentary has really been about. Not changing your thoughts, changing your relationship with them. Because for years, you've probably believed you were listening to yourself, but perhaps you've been listening to a storyteller shaped by childhood, by memory, by fear, by hope, by language, by every person who ever taught you what the world was supposed to be. And storytellers do exactly what storytellers do. They create stories. Some stories protect you, some prepare you, some inspire you, some keep you alive, and some keep repeating chapters that ended years ago. That doesn't make the storyteller your enemy. It simply means the storyteller isn't the author of your life. Think back to every version of yourself you've ever been: the child, the teenager, the young adult. Each one believed different things, feared different things, dreamed different dreams. The voice changed again and again and again. Opinions changed, goals changed, relationships changed. Even your personality kept evolving. So here's the question that stayed hidden until now. What has remained through every version of you? Not the thoughts, not the fears, not the stories. Something quieter, something that has been there before every thought and after every thought. Simply watching, learning, listening. The voice has rewritten itself thousands of times. The listener never had to. Maybe that's the greatest misunderstanding we've carried our entire lives. We believed we were the voice, when in reality, we were the one hearing it. And suddenly, everything changes, because if you are not every thought, then you don't have to obey every thought. If you are not every fear, you don't have to build your future around every fear. If you are not every story, you are finally free to write a different one. Maybe freedom was never the absence of thoughts. Maybe freedom is the space between a thought appearing and your decision to believe it. Because inside that tiny space, something extraordinary exists. Choice. the choice to question, the choice to let go, the choice to stop giving every passing thought the power to define your identity. So, before this documentary ends, I want to leave you with one final question, not one to answer today, one to carry with you. The next time your mind whispers, "You're not enough, you're going to fail, everyone is judging you." Don't argue, don't defend yourself, don't panic, just become curious. And quietly ask, who's speaking? That single question may become the beginning of an entirely different relationship with your own mind. Maybe the greatest mystery was never the universe. Maybe it has always been the mind trying to understand itself. That's why this channel exists. Not to give you ready-made answers, but to explore the questions that quietly shape every human life. Because the day you begin questioning the voice inside your head may also be the day you begin discovering the person who has been listening all along.